All right, well, we're back.
We're back.
We had a nice little night to get some rest, come back, and we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. So as we continue in our recap of the monarchy to the end of the Old Testament, we find ourselves at the end of the kingdom of Israel.
We do.
The exile of the kingdom of Judah.
Yep.
And we're going to pick up with Judah in exile and go all the way to Malachi.
Yeah.
On your mark.
I've digitized my notes.
On your mark.
Get
set.
Go.
Go.
So, we left off on a pretty sad note. And we're
Yeah, big bummer.
and we're like Israel
the complete
Israel
destruction of Judah and God's temple and all that stuff.
Yeah, Israel is gone. Judah is all but gone. They have been destroyed. Bless you. Faith's eardrums are also gone.
Faith, I pulled the mic so far away from me. I can't help. I don't know what you want from me.
Nice. Faith's eardrums are also gone. But a lot of things happen while in exile. A lot of bad things.
Yeah.
But a lot of pretty great promises, too.
Yeah, this is probably a good point to talk a little bit about Babylon, because Babylon becomes the last big bad of the Old Testament that we kind of have, because just history of Israel-wise, you're going to go Babylon, Persia conquers.
Persia's not great for
Rome
like a
conquers.
second.
Yeah, for sure not ideal, but like in terms of like, man, we've had the Philistines, we've had the
Should we introduce them to the acronym?
Yeah, absolutely.
Iguanas eat apples because pears
give rickets.
Okay, there's this awful acronym. I hate it, and I think it could be better.
But it helps. So, for the nation of Israel / Judah, they were under oppression and rule of foreigners for
a long time. Long time. Yeah. So there's this acronym that helps you remember all the major nations
that are
in the Old Testament. And I don't like this acronym because it leaves out a few.
Well,
Philistines and Syria.
Yeah, but it's
all the major ones.
Yeah, and it's also like from the monarchy on.
Yeah.
So like the Philistines weren't really in possession of the land during the monarchy. So
That's
it's like Israel. Well, iguanas eat apples because parrots give rickets. It's Israel, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome.
Yep, that's it.
Super easy. That's all you needed.
Yeah, iguanas eat apples because pears give rickets. It's the easiest way to remember. It's not, but
well, it is.
It's the best thing. It's the best thing I've.
Year of college,
you're right.
Stuck in there.
It's the best way that I've encountered so far. Maybe we should write another one.
Listen, that's been in my head for over a decade.
Yeah, I still don't know what rickets is.
It's some kind of disease.
I'm kind of afraid of pears now. I hope that's not true.
Well, I think it's only a thing that iguanas have to worry about.
Anyways, so it might. We do need to talk about Babylon.
Yeah,
we do need to talk about Babylon.
So Babylon.
Let's talk about Babylon
because Babylon is like the last giant big bad of the Old Testament, but also they show up all over the New Testament, even though they've been conquered, because Babylon becomes this metaphor for all of the evil, wicked, worldly systems that are out there.
Yes.
And even like in the book of Revelation, Babylon is the kind of metaphor for the kingdom of the world that is passing away.
Yes.
So, Dill, what's up with Babylon? What do we need to know about this empire?
Well, actually, this is kind of offhanded, but we're kind of introduced to like Babylon's sin all the way back at Babel, which is cool.
Yep.
So we're told in the Babel narrative
that
they tried to build a tower that reached heaven.
The Babel narrative gives some illustration there. Like it's supposed to be a tower to reach the heavens. And because it's this triangular base, you can build them really, really tall, and these things cover Babylon.
Yeah. And the kind of the irony there is that, you know, obviously what happens is, if you don't know the story, is that they try to build this tower, they get scattered, their languages are confused, and it is called Babel because their God confused their languages. Babylon literally means gate to God, which is a very interesting connection there. Is that what is actually confusion they are worshiping and primarily focused. So in Babylon, ziggurats come back in a very big way, and in fact, where Babel was, I might be mistaken here. Don't take this to the bank, but in the land of Shinar is kind of where Babylon was, I believe.
Yeah, and that's where Babel was located.
Yeah,
somewhere in those plains. And so, what you need to know about Babylon, besides all the fun architecture that we sort of demonstrated with our hands there, is Babylon is the most powerful ancient empire at this point. Like,
Yeah.
like what Egypt was, this is now what Babylon is.
But times a few. Like, they're
Yeah.
insane.
They are huge. One of the ancient 7 wonders of the world was like the Babylonian Hanging Gardens. Like this is power, this is wealth, and this is like vicious fury. Babylon is a place of wickedness, depravity, ton of power on display. So this is as far away from what the people of God are supposed to be doing as possible. Almost every Babylonian custom flew in the face of what God's people were called to do and how they were called to live. And so this is the nation that has come to conquer and taken the people of Judah into exile, where they're going to have to live.
Yeah. Right before Babylon takes over, however, we're introduced to my personal favorite prophet in the Old Testament, a guy named Jeremiah.
I don't know. Dude just cried a lot.
Jeremiah, well, you read Jeremiah's story and you'd be like, yeah, me too. I would too.
Jeremiah's nickname in the Bible is the Weeping Prophet.
Yeah. Jeremiah actually has 2 books. He has his book, Jeremiah. He also has the book of Lamentations, which is a bunch of laments on behalf of the state of Judah and idolatry and what's about to happen to them.
Dude is super sad because he watches his people get destroyed.
Yeah. So the tragedy of Jeremiah really is that Jeremiah rises before Babylon comes in and takes over to basically go tell Israel to turn away from their sin, to turn away from their idolatry. The story starts out, he goes to his hometown where everybody knows him. He tells them, hey, a message from the Lord, VeggieTales got him. Turn away from your sin, turn away from your rebellion. And they his hometown, these are people that he grew up with, people he knows, they plot to kill him because of the message that he has brought.
Yep.
And he has to run and flee and hide, and nobody ever listens to Jeremiah.
Yeah, well,
ever.
And you get some of this commentary on it when Jesus gets thrown out of his hometown of Nazareth, and he says, like, hey, a prophet has no honor in his hometown.
Yeah.
Pulling on those ideas of, like, how Jeremiah was treated in his hometown.
Yeah.
So Jeremiah shows up. He's one of the big major prophets here. We've already been introduced to Isaiah when we were talking yesterday. He's another one of the major prophets that is operating right now.
Yeah.
And then we have Ezekiel, who's also operating right now. And then we have our boy Daniel.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the big 4 prophets.
The
at this
big
point,
4.
Right? I'm
Yeah.
missing anybody?
No. There's a few minors like Habakkuk and Hosea and all those but
Also, in case you've ever read your Bible and been like, well, why are we dissing these guys and elevating these dudes? The major prophet, minor prophet is about how long their book is, not how important of a prophet they were. So
actually, one of my favorite prophets in the Old Testament is actually Hosea.
I love. It's gone all of a sudden.
Obadiah?
Micah. Big Micah guy.
Micah's cool. But so Jeremiah shows up, and it's really sad because I think of it like him warning a friend about something like a coming disaster, and then somebody completely not even listening, and then getting destroyed, because that's literally what happens. I mean, he watches, he tries to warn, he does everything that he can to warn Judah about their sin and about what's happening, and they don't listen. And then Babylon comes in, and there's actually 2 pretty major events in the Babylonian, siege and attack.
Wreckage.
There's 2 big deportations. The first one of them, I think, was in 605 AD BC. You don't need to remember that date, but you do need to remember the 4 guys actually that get removed from that deportation. A guy named Daniel, Hananiah,
Mishael,
and Azariah, and Daniel.
That's right. Or
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Or Rakshak and Benny. VeggieTales. Got him.
Nice, let's go. So if you're confused on what happened there, Azariah, Hananiah, and Mishael were their birth names. Then they get pulled out of Israel, or Judah rather, into Babylon for the purpose of becoming like counselors and like wise individuals.
The Babylonians had this, the way that they did, because they were a conquering people. That's what they did. And so they kind of divided up the people. Some people would stay to kind of tend the land, to be a vassal state.
Yep.
Some people would come to be like slave labor type situation in the actual Empire of Babylon. And then the best and brightest of the conquered people they would take, and then they would basically put them through like a re-education camp.
Yep.
And they would turn them into kind of courtiers of the Babylonian court. And so these dudes, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and Daniel, are kind of the best of the young dudes in Judah. Yeah. And so they get brought to Babylon into the court of King Nebuchadnezzar.
Extremely faithful people.
Extremely faithful people.
And they get renamed.
Yes, and that's where, so part of the Babylonian piece is
Yeah.
they're not just teaching them Babylonian customs. They're not just making them eat Babylonian food, but they're giving them Babylonian names.
Yeah. And the first major instance that we see does surround food.
Yep.
Because they bring him in. Nebuchadnezzar is like, hey, we're going to feed them our diet. Daniel's like, pump the brakes. Let us eat our food, and let's just kind of play it out, see what happens.
So they prove themselves that keeping Jewish dietary law was treating them better than the rich food of the Babylonian court.
Yep.
They kind of get like, hey, you're doing a great job from Nebuchadnezzar, but then Nebuchadnezzar institutes a new rule about worship.
Pretty prideful.
So here we go.
So Nebuchadnezzar, a little full of himself, he's like, hey, we're going to build a big...
Tough to be king of the greatest empire in the entire world
Yeah.
and not be.
Yeah. But, I mean, viewed himself as like a deity, essentially.
Yes.
And basically says, hey, I'm going to build a giant golden image in my own image.
Right.
And there's going to come a time of day where everybody's going to play a bunch of instruments and everybody has to bow down before my images. Up to this point, Nebuchadnezzar loves Daniel. He loves Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because of how wise they are. That changes pretty rapidly.
Well, for some reason, Daniel's not in this part of the story.
Yeah.
We don't really know
He's
why.
He's off somewhere
But
else doing
Rakshak and
something.
Benny are right here.
Rakshak and Benny are right here. So he builds this. They play all the instruments. Everybody in the nation falls down except for three guys, Rakshak and Benny.
And they do not get treated very kindly.
They do not get treated very kindly at all. This is reported that there's actually, I think it's reported by, I'm not going to say that because I'm not 100%, but it gets reported that they don't fall down and worship. So they get pulled before, if you can find what they say to Nebuchadnezzar, their response to Nebuchadnezzar, makes
Pretty
me
baller.
Makes me want to go work out. Go to the gym. It's insane. So Nebuchadnezzar basically pulls them in front of, pulls him, into his throne room, and he's like, hey, I'm going to give you another chance. If you don't fall down and worship my image, I'm going to throw you into a flaming, burning furnace. And hopefully Zach here in just a second can find their response. They respond to Nebuchadnezzar with this.
O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter, the most powerful man in the world.
Yeah.
We have no need to answer you. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, then be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up.
I literally got goosebumps when you read that.
Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury. The expression of his face was changed, and he ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than it normally was heated.
It was heated so hot that somebody goes to open it or throw more wood in there.
Take Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to throw them into the furnace.
And just being in the general proximity of the furnace killed him.
Yeah, the men who tried to throw them in all died.
Yeah. So they throw Rakshak and Benny into the furnace, and then they're like, oh, okay, let's check on them. So they look into the furnace, and they're fine.
And not just fine, but
They
not
got a
three
little
people
buddy
in there
with
anymore.
them. Yeah. Who I think was
The
Jesus.
angel of the Lord.
The angel of the Lord
He's
was
showing
in there
up
with them.
again.
There was 4 men. One of them had the appearance of a son of God, I believe it says, which I believe was Jesus. Which is crazy. At this, Nebuchadnezzar is a little spooked.
And he does a good thing.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he lets them out. They go free, and
Nebuchadnezzar worships God.
he worships God, which is awesome.
Yeah,
which is cool. And then some weird things happen.
A bunch of weird stuff happens.
In Nebuchadnezzar's story. Nebuchadnezzar ends up having another dream.
He kind of goes crazy for a bit.
He kind of goes crazy. He has another dream, and Daniel, again, interprets his dream, saying that, hey, this is about your pride. You're incredibly prideful. You got to stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of
Goes into the wilderness for a while.
Goes into the wilderness and lives as a cow
He does.
for years.
Yes, there's a little just detour in the book of Daniel where the most powerful man in the world goes insane.
Yeah, for a long time.
And then
Comes back
as a worshiper of God.
and praises the Lord.
And that's kind of the end of Nebuchadnezzar's story.
Which is crazy. Also, kind of towards the end of the Babylonian exile too.
We're inching towards it. So one of the interesting things to note, and we're spending a little bit more time specifically on this story than maybe we will with the other ones, just because we have a lot of detail about these 4 guys and their lives. But one of the really interesting things to see here is this is the moment where God's temple has been crushed, God's people have been conquered, all of the things that God has promised seem to be going unfulfilled, and yet the most powerful man in the entire world at this point is reduced to this little pawn in God's hands.
Yeah.
And God shows up and draws his eyes towards himself, and like
changes his life.
it seems like all indications in the text say that like we'll get to speak to Nebuchadnezzar in heaven one day, because somehow as he's like in the midst of his like mental break living as a cow, he comes to know God.
Well, it's kind of crazy because he has this dream about his pride, because obviously he's building a golden image into himself.
Yeah, he's a little full of
in his own in his own image, and so he goes from that and gets as humiliated as someone could probably possibly be, loses his mind and lives as a like livestock, eating grass and stuff like that, which is absolutely insane. Also, before we get to the end of the Babylonian exile, which there's a lot of overlap, because we're gonna have to talk about Ezekiel as well.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting to note here is in the book of Daniel, the first 4 chapters, we're dealing with Nebuchadnezzar, and then we switch to King Belshazzar.
Yeah.
And then a little bit later, we'll go to King Darius, because in the midst of the Babylonian exile, Babylon actually gets conquered.
They do.
And the Medes come in. And Darius, who is familiar because he's the one who throws Daniel in the lion's den, is actually Darius the Mede. He's not a Babylonian ruler. He has come in and they've conquered Babylon. And so we call this whole period the Babylonian exile, but the Medes actually come in, and then eventually the Persians come in. And so one of those interesting things to note as we're reading it.
Yeah.
But before we can tell the end of Daniel's story, because the end of Daniel's story happens about 70 years after some stuff, we got to get into some of the other prophetic works that's going on, because there are some really important promises that come into play.
So, first Babylonian deportation was Daniel, Shadrach, and Benny.
Kind of your upper echelon folks.
Yeah. There's a second deportation in which another prophet gets exiled, a guy named Ezekiel. Zach, you just taught a message primarily on Ezekiel's prophecy, so I'll let you kind of take over and explain what Zeke does.
Ezekiel is a wild book. Ezekiel has, of all the prophets, he kind of has the most, like, other than some of Daniel's visions at the end of Daniel, Ezekiel has some wild visions.
Yep.
He has visions about, like, the very throne room of God. He has visions about some, like, angelic-type beings that are pretty mind-bending. And if you read through the first couple chapters of Ezekiel and you try to picture what he's saying, it's unbelievably hard to reckon with. So Ezekiel is kind of the seer. He has these visions. He also is called to do these pretty wild, like, radical prophetic acts. And so, like, he's, like, laying, like, on his side for 70 days, all this different stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on with Ezekiel. So he is deported. He is in Babylon, and his whole prophetic work is happening in Babylon. The other thing that we need to talk about, though, before we can get to Ezekiel's promise, is Jeremiah, who is the prophet that Dill loves, who I believe stays in Judah the whole time, right?
Yeah.
He's left behind, but he ends up writing a letter to the exiles in Babylon that's super important to understand kind of the timeline of everything that's happening here. So one of the things that was apparently going on in Babylon, so the people of Judah, as they're exiled, there are these false prophets that start showing up, right? And they start telling the people, hey, don't worry, we're going home soon. So, like, keep your bags packed, don't settle in, we're getting out of here.
One of my favorite verses in the Bible.
This is Jeremiah chapter 29.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah 29:11 is the verse that everybody has their grandma who is crocheted on a pillow that says, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you. What nobody knows about that verse is that it's part of Jeremiah's letter to the exiles that he writes to say, hey, all those dudes who are going around telling you you're about to go home are liars.
Yeah.
You are going to stay in captivity for a long time because you have been unfaithful, and God is going to punish his people for this.
Yes.
And so that verse comes in the midst of a kind of depressing letter from Jeremiah. But it's a letter that I really love.
Yeah.
Because there's a few things that he says. He says, number one, it's time for you to put down roots, build houses, have kids and marry them off, plant gardens, plant vineyards. You're here for the long haul. So do all these things and work for the good of the land, because the Lord your God will work through you. And so Jeremiah writes the exiles to say, actually, it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
And he says, while it's going to be a while, your God, despite your unfaithfulness, he has not abandoned you.
Yeah.
God is still going to be faithful to you. In fact, the good things that you do in Babylon, God is going to use to bring about good and flourishing, not just for his people, but for the whole world, which is very Abrahamic in the covenant that God made with Abraham, that the whole world will be blessed through his people. So God's being faithful. And then Jeremiah actually says it's not going to be now, it's going to be 70 years. So there's this promise that God's people get kind of at the beginning of the exile, where 70 years or so, God is going to move to restore and redeem his people.
Yep.
Good so far?
Yep.
All right. Then we have all these other prophetic works that are going on. The major prophets are really, really long.
They're
Isaiah, Jeremiah,
extremely
Ezekiel,
long.
they're really long books.
Yep.
There's a lot of prophecies going on in here.
Yeah.
They're all important.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to hang on this one major promise that shows up in both Jeremiah
And Ezekiel. Yep.
You want to hit it?
I'll hit Jeremiah if you want to hit Ezekiel.
All right, you hit Jeremiah.
Because Ezekiel has the awesome Valley of Dry Bones.
Yeah,
piece.
Ezekiel's is cooler, but Jeremiah's is a little more detailed.
So Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet, and it's an incredibly sad book, but it ends with one of the most exciting, encouraging promises that could have been given in the Old Testament in chapter 31, which is the promise of the new covenant. Jeremiah delivers a word that says, I will give you a new heart of flesh. My law will be written on your hearts, and I will give you a new spirit. And so in like hundreds of years before the New Testament, before the events of Acts 2, before Jesus shows up, the people of Israel are promised renewal, they're promised a new covenant, and they're promised the Holy Spirit that now dwells within us today as believers, which is, after 30 chapters of just sad. I mean, what a way to end. Yeah, it's incredible. And then Ezekiel, we have
the same promise,
very
but just some different
similar.
language.
Yeah.
He gives a little bit more detail as to what Jeremiah had said, of that this new covenant would include a washing clean, that God's people are in exile because they've been unfaithful to God. They've had all this sin that has built up, but God is going to wash his people clean. He's going to give them that new heart that Jeremiah promised and fill them with his spirit. And then the illustration that he gives is Ezekiel has another one of his wild visions. And he's in a just a desolate valley that apparently a battle took place in or something. And it is a valley filled with skeletons, a valley of dry bones. And through the word of God and the spirit of God, that valley of dry bones becomes a living, breathing army. And it's this picture of God restoring and renewing his people and giving them new life. Yeah. And so this is one of the most important things in the Bible because, again, a covenant is all about relationship. Yep. And so we have a series of promises and covenants that we've been tracing the whole time that we've been reading through the Old Testament that all are leading up to the arrival of Jesus. And so Genesis 3, after humanity sins, we have the proto-evangelion, the first gospel, that promise that God makes that
promises the snake crusher.
The snake crusher.
Jesus.
There's one who would come, born of a woman, who will crush the head of the serpent. Yep. And then we get the covenant with Abraham, that the snake crusher
come from the people of God.
And then we have the covenant with Moses, that this Israelite snake crusher was going to make all, he's going to do somehow he's going to deal with the sin of the people, set them apart, and bring the presence of God back. Yep. Then we have the covenant with David, that this snake crusher from Abraham's line, who's going to deal with the people's sins and bring the presence of God back, will be a
great king.
And then we find out that this is all going to be accomplished by God making a new covenant with his people. Yeah. Come on.
The Old Testament rocks, guys.
All of this in the midst of exile.
In the midst of exile.
And then probably the other prophetic thing we should talk about going on during the exile is Isaiah in his book. Isaiah sometimes gets called the gospel of the Old Testament because Isaiah talks a lot about Jesus. Yep. Just in a prophetic sense. Yep. So what are some of the things that Isaiah starts telling us about, specifically I'm thinking about the servant songs. Yeah. That Isaiah starts to tell us that when we start piecing all these things together, we start to get a pretty interesting view of this promised snake crusher who's going to come.
Isaiah tells us two big things about Jesus. Tells us that he's going to be a mighty, triumphant, conquering king. And this is
which is very much in line with what David's been promised.
And then this gets really interesting. Also tells us that he's going to be a suffering servant. He will suffer, which is weird. It's at
weird,
first glance.
Except for
when you take everything else in the Old Testament into context, it makes perfect sense.
Isaiah is kind of the piece that starts putting all of the puzzle together for us.
Yeah.
We have this promise back in Genesis 3 that the one who would come, born of Eve, will be a human who crushes the head of the serpent, and yet the crushing of the head will also entail the striking of his heel.
Yes.
There's this idea of victory through suffering that we get in Genesis 3 that Isaiah starts to really play out in the suffering servant.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're introduced to this triumphant king who would come in, kind of like what we read about in David, who would make all things new. And then later on in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 53 is the pretty popular chapter, the suffering servant, where given more detail about what this king would be like. He would be someone who had no beauty that we should esteem him. He was someone who was smitten and crushed by God. And, it gets into this when, taking that out of the context of the Old Testament, it leaves us with a lot of questions. How can someone be a triumphant king but also suffer in the way that Christ did? But then you look at the elements of the old law and the sacrificial system. You look at the covenant that God made with Abraham, saying, whenever you fail, undoubtedly, I will take the brunt of that. So in Isaiah, we are promised the king who would come, whose heel would be struck, but in doing so would be in the crushing of the snake's head, bringing renewal and freedom for his people.
Yeah.
Doing everything that a king does through the role of the suffering servant.
Yeah.
It's both and, victory through suffering.
Both and. And so we have these major prophetic promises that are going on over all these things. We have this promise that God's people are going to return from exile.
Yep.
We have this promise that God's going to make a new covenant with his people.
Yep.
And that this new covenant is going to be brought about by this suffering servant king, who is the fulfillment of the promise given to Adam, the covenant with Abraham, the covenant with Moses, and the covenant with David. And so everything's been leading up to these moments. But the prophets also have some other really important things to say.
They do.
It's not just they're talking about God's people coming back, but they also have this vision of what God is going to do in all of creation. Like, it's talked about as the day of the Lord. You want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're going to see when the day of the Lord comes and when all things are hitting?
I've spent a lot of things like, talking about newness for his people, but it's also newness for all creation.
All creation.
Yeah, if you want to hit the details of that, go ahead.
I would love to.
I know you're very excited about this.
So between Ezekiel, Isaiah, some of Jeremiah, we get these visions of some different things that God is going to once again have a people for himself.
Yeah.
But there's indications that this people are not just going to be national-born Israelites, but that all people will actually be invited in. That there's going to be Gentiles and Jews alike who are going to be part of God's people.
We see that all the way back in Abraham. Like, through you will all the nations of the world
be blessed. Yeah.
Not just Israel.
And now we have this kind of intensification of that promise that not only are they going to be blessed, but they're actually going to be brought into the people.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly how it's going to happen yet, but there's some indication that God's going to do something involving the Gentiles too.
Yeah.
There's this idea that the boundary markers of the land of the nation of Israel, of Judah, are going to kind of just start expanding and expanding and expanding, and it's going to cover the whole world.
Hey, Zach, where do we see that? Where's the first time we see that in Scripture?
Oh, you mean like in Genesis 1 where God tells Adam and Eve to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it?
Yeah, that's it.
And how that commission was given to Noah, and that basic commission was given to Abraham and to Moses, and everybody's been failing?
And to all these new Adams, yeah.
Yeah, all these new Adams who all fail and sin the same way. Remember we said that Scripture is a
cycle?
spiral? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's this promise that cycle is going to be broken, and that the commission that was originally given to Adam is actually going to be fulfilled. And my personal favorite part of it is there's a lot of prophecy about the temple. Now, remember, the temple was destroyed when Babylon came in and wiped out the nation of Judah. But we're told that the temple is going to be rebuilt. But the way the prophets talk about this rebuilt temple is a little bit different, because it's not just like, well, there's going to be, like 4 walls and they'll go up. The temple that's being described is massive.
Yeah.
In fact, we're told the temple is going to become so big that it's going to cover the entire world. There's this vision of the whole world becoming God's temple, and that the presence of God is going to dwell over the entire world the way that he was supposed to all the way back in the beginning when he created the world in the first place. And so there's a lot of prophecies about God's people returning to their homeland. But even more than that, there are these indications that God is going to move in a way that is not just going to be about the nation of Judah, but is going to be cosmic in its significance for the entire world, Jew and Gentile alike, there's this promise of new creation that comes out really importantly in these prophets. And that theme of new creation, of restoration, of God's presence for all people are going to be important in the New Testament.
A little bit important. You should like the Old Testament. The Old Testament rocks.
The Old Testament
is incredible. It is like, this is going to be such a bad illustration, but the Scripture to me is like an iceberg. Like, everybody starts in the Gospels, and which is incredible. It's amazing. We see the fulfillment of all these promises. But the Old Testament is looking below the water and seeing all the promises that led to the peak, what's poking out of the water. It's incredible.
Well, and this is the reason that we're doing HSM Reads the Bible.
Yeah.
Is, man, the beauty of the good news of Jesus is if you can understand a little bit of what John 3:16 says, like, you're in, dude.
Yeah.
Like, God so loved the world, he sent his one and only Son. Whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. There is just such a succinct vision of the gospel. And yet, when we begin to see all of these Old Testament storylines and all the way that things that happened way back in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 have spread their roots throughout the whole story, then when we get to the Gospels and we start to see what Jesus is doing, what he says he's come to do, and the things that he's saying, the miracles that he's performing, the places that he's doing things, we start to have our eyes open like, oh my gosh, that's what God's doing. That promise that he made way back in like Isaiah is coming to fruition here.
Yeah.
And Jesus' promises that he says, like, this is what you're going to go and do. This is fulfilling these new covenant promises.
Yeah. This is a little bit of a left-hand turn. There's a mathematician named Peter Stoner, which is, I don't know, I think he's MIT guy. I'm not 100% sure. But he ran like this.
This is a little bit of a left-hand turn.
This is a little left-hand turn, but this is awesome. This
I know. I actually know where you're going now.
This really put it in perspective for me. He worked out like the statistics, like the likelihood of Jesus fulfilling eight prophecies in the Old Testament. The likelihood for someone to fulfill 8 prophecies about the Messiah in the Old Testament was 1 in 100 trillion. Which, to put that into perspective,
big number.
is if you take a silver dollar, which is a coin that's about this big, if you take 100 trillion of those, you could fill the entire state of Texas 2 feet deep in silver dollars. If 100 trillion, you could take silver dollars, pile the whole state of Texas 2 feet deep in silver dollars. 1 in 100 trillion, you paint one of those coins red, and just you randomly reach in somewhere and pull it out. That's the likelihood of one person fulfilling eight prophecies in the Old Testament, this one Messiah. Jesus fulfilled over 360, which is a number that cannot be illustrated, the likelihood of that happening.
Imagine you had 400 Texases and you filled them.
But it's crazy. Like,
crazy.
The fact that Jesus, the Messiah King, fulfilled everything that was spoken about him in the Old Testament it is either crazy or it's either impossible or it had to happen.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely wild. But
Okay,
Babylon,
we got to finish the story.
we're back.
So Jeremiah writes this letter to the exiles, and he says, 70 years you're going to be in exile.
Yep.
And then Daniel is reading the scroll of Jeremiah, because that's what he does.
Of course.
And he says, wait a minute, 70 years? It's been
70 years.
And Daniel starts to pray.
Yeah. Should we talk about Belshazzar's feast?
You talk about whatever you want to, brother.
Yeah. So eventually a new
This is your
king,
show.
like Zach said, takes over in Babylon. And at his feast, a mysterious, like, ghostly hand appears and writes something on the wall that nobody can understand, except for Daniel, who shows up and he was like, that says basically that Babylon is going to fall, which it did.
Which you did.
That
A lot
night.
of similarities between Daniel and Joseph.
A lot of similarities, which they got conquered that night by the
Medes.
It was like the Medes and Persians are kind of
Yeah,
similar, the same.
Things get a little wonky there.
Yeah, but Darius takes over.
Yes.
And it's not great for a minute because we have a real Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego situation.
Yes, Darius
pop
also
back
would
up.
like to be worshipped.
But Daniel said no.
No.
And so Daniel prays 3 times a day, and he doesn't stop doing that. And so Darius doesn't like that none too much. Takes Daniel, and he throws him in a den full of lions.
Tough.
I don't know if you know about lions. They're big. They're
They
hungry.
eat
They eat people. And Daniel's down there. Dude, we talked about this a while ago. Like, one of the things I'm most excited about in the new heaven and new earth is to be able to go up to big cats and be like, pss, 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 and just like, that's why I like to imagine Daniel was doing in the lion's den.
Yeah.
Was sitting down there. They're not attacking him.
Just petting the lions.
Just having a good time.
Yep.
And Darius kind of has a Nebuchadnezzar moment where he pulls Daniel out of the lion's den and honors the Lord.
Honors the Lord.
Yep. And then we are finally introduced to the return.
The return. So eventually, Darius dies.
Darius does die.
Darius the Mede.
Yep.
And I'm going to be honest with you.
Cyrus?
I'm semi-fuzzy on exactly how the geopolitical events take place. But
King named Cyrus eventually takes
the king
over.
of Persia,
Yep.
a man named Cyrus, takes over
Yep.
the rule of Babylon.
And he is a pretty good guy.
Pretty good guy.
He lets the Judeans go home.
As far as we can know, Cyrus remains a pagan for his
Yep.
whole life. But he is used by God to redeem and restore his people to the land.
Yep. So he allows the Jews to return. They
And
go home.
this story really takes place over the books of Ezra and Nehemiah.
Yep.
Ezra is a book that tells a story of the we'll get there. But Nehemiah is kind of, I think chronologically Nehemiah is first, right? They're kind of the same time.
I think the return, they're kind of, there's a lot of overlap. I think the return happens with Ezra, covers that mostly,
Yeah.
because that's the rebuilding of the temple
Yeah.
and everything. Maybe it's Nehemiah. There's a lot of
Nehemiah
overlap.
is the story of the rebuilding of the walls around the
Yeah.
city of Judah. So Nehemiah goes back. He has a bunch of buddies. They all begin rebuilding the wall. And I believe, was Ezra man, we're just guessing right now. I think Ezra was a priest, wasn't he?
Maybe. Perhaps. We'll find out real quick. But these two guys, Ezra and Nehemiah, really, really took over of the restoration projects in Judah and Jerusalem.
Yes.
He is
Ezra was a priest.
He's a priest.
Nehemiah oversaw the rebuilding of the walls.
Yep.
Ezra was tasked with the rebuilding of God's temple.
Which was actually carried out by everyone's favorite biblical character, Zerubbabel. Rebuilt it. Rebuilt the temple. Everybody knows Zerubbabel. You should. He rebuilt the temple.
Rebuilt the temple.
He did. He sure did.
And so there's this storyline where God's people return from exile in Babylon.
They sure do.
They have new walls.
Mhm.
They have a rebuilt temple, the second temple.
Yep.
And everything's perfect.
Yeah, for a minute. And then worship of Yahweh kind of becomes stagnant again,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then we're introduced to the last book of the Old Testament, a prophet named Malachi, who shows up and basically says, maybe love the Lord a little bit more. And then he talks about John the Baptist.
He does.
Which is crazy. And, you know, I don't think we talked about, Daniel interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's dream of what is to come of these next nations. So obviously, let's rewind a little bit. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of this statue that's made out of a bunch of different metals, and it falls down, and there's I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details, but he doesn't understand. And so Daniel's like, "Oh, I do. There's going to be a few nations that come after Babylon that are like one's going to conquer one, the next one's going to conquer it, and then the biggest one is going to come." Which he's obviously talking about Persia, and then Greece, and then Rome. Which is tough.
Which is
So-
the big bad.
The big bad. So we have seen Babylon. We have seen Persia.
We don't ever really see Greece.
We don't see Greece in the Old Testament.
So
There's-
let's finish
Yeah.
the Old Testament.
Yep.
And then we could do a few minutes on
Yeah.
intertestamental.
So Malachi ends with Malachi basically calling for renewed worship in Israel. He then has a big prophetic word about Elijah is going to return, who's going to, basically pave the way for, the Messiah, I believe, is discussed in Malachi. So we have this last kind of foretelling of the Messiah who is to come. And then there's 400 years of nothing.
Yeah.
Really.
So one last theme we need to talk about before we leave the Old Testament behind us is that there's this idea that while the people of Judah physically return from their exile in Babylon,
Yes.
that spiritually they are still in exile.
Yeah. They're still
And
in decline.
there's a few reasons for this. One of which is actually the temple itself. So the prophets made all these promises that God's temple would be rebuilt.
Yeah.
And so when we see the story of Ezra and Nehemiah, it's like, well, there it is, right?
Not
and
really.
yet there's something missing.
A big thing
The thing, actually.
that was lost that we didn't cover.
the Ark of the Covenant.
Yep. Where God's rests in the temple and the
Right.
tabernacle
The mercy seat itself, where the presence of God rests in the Holy of Holies in the temple,
is gone.
is gone.
It's never found again.
The Ark of the Covenant is gone. And so there's this picture where even though worship in the temple is reinstated, the temple itself is rebuilt, God's, like, the physical place of God's presence is no longer really there.
Yeah.
And so Israel, Judah, while they've returned, their hearts still, like Dill was saying, they've drifted. This new covenant promise of the new heart, the new spirit, it hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
And ultimately, they do start to drift away from worship again. The prophet Malachi calls them back. And so you have this idea of a physical return from exile, and yet the people are still spiritually in exile, needing to be returned, needing to be restored.
Yeah.
And that's where the story of the Old Testament ends.
Yep.
And then we don't get anything in the Bible for 400 years.
Yep. Till the New Testament.
Which, just again, to kind of put it into perspective, is a little less than twice as long as the United States has been a country.
Yeah.
So we're talking long, long time, generations upon generations, where there is no prophet who is speaking, no book of the Bible that's being written.
Yeah.
400 years of silence.
A lot of things happen in the world, though.
A lot of things happen in the world, and we should talk about them.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know how we're going to actually structure this. If this is just 1 2-hour episode, and if so, if this is 2 hours and you're still listening,
Praise
great
God
job.
for you.
Or if this is like, let's do the monarchy, let's do the exile, let's do the intertestamental. I don't know. Faith,
That's
it's
fine.
up to you. You can do whatever you want to with this.
Yep.
But there is that period of 400 years we call the intertestamental period because it's the time period between the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Guess who shows up?
Greece, specifically Alexander the Great.
Yeah. Who just conquers everything.
Yeah. So if you have studied some ancient world history stuff, we're kind of into the area that people start to be a little more interested in.
Yep.
So Alexander conquers the world.
Basically, yeah.
And everyone is now under the rule of him.
Yep.
And then he dies.
And then he dies.
But during Alexander's rule, Greece comes to conquer and rule over the nation of Judah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to talk about that whole time frame?
Not really. I mean,
Nothing?
you can if you want to.
Dude, we got to talk about the Greek occupation.
Go for it.
A little bit. Okay, so there's a few things that happened. One,
I know jarringly little than I should. I know
do you not
less
know
than I
about
should
the
know.
Maccabees?
No.
Brother, we got to talk about
Let's
this.
talk about the
okay,
Maccabees.
man.
Not much.
At this
I mean, I
point-
can give you a little bit.
I mean,
but
I don't
not,
know a ton, but
not
it's
much
cool.
about. Clearly, not as much as you do.
No, it's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so
I know it's a book in the Apocrypha.
it is, yeah. If you've ever been like, what's up with these books that people say are in the Bible but aren't, the Apocrypha is written during this intertestamental period. We, as Protestants, don't hold these books to be actually the Word of God, but they do give us some interesting insight into what's going on.
There's a lot happening.
There's a lot going on.
in the Apocrypha.
But it's not the inspired Word of God.
No, it is not.
Okay, so here's what we should know.
It's not.
Alexander comes in, conquers everything, and the people of Judah are now under the rule of Greece. And Greece, unlike Persia, is not super interested in being kind to the worship of Yahweh.
Correct. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff that goes on, but I think it was Antiochus Epiphanes. Don't quote me on that. Greek general, maybe, governor.
Sure.
We're now outside of the pages of the Bible. We can be wrong about stuff. It's fine.
It's fine. We don't know everything.
There's
guys.
a Greek dude who comes into Judah, and in order to show the dominance of Greece, he takes a pig and he puts it on the altar in the temple, and he sacrifices the pig. Which pork, swine was unclean for the people of Israel. This is
Big no-no.
This is a blasphemous act.
Yeah, real bad.
And this is what it's like to be the people of God under Greek occupation. They are enslaved, they are mistreated, and they are trying, the Greeks are trying to force everyone in Judah to become Greek, to speak Greek.
Hellenization is what that's called.
Hellenization. So there's this Hellenization effort. They want them to worship Greek gods. But there's this dude, and his name is Judas, not the bad guy Judas. This Judas actually rocks. And he says, we will not do this. Judas had a nickname. His nickname was the Hammer. Judas is one of the Maccabees. That's a family in Judah. And the Maccabees become this really important family. And Judas, the Hammer, leads a revolt by holding a hammer. And him and his family and some of their buddies go to war against Greece. And they actually, for a limited time period,
Do pretty well.
drive the Greeks out of Judah and take back their nation and reestablish Jewish rule over the nation. This is actually what is celebrated in Hanukkah, is the Maccabees overthrowing the Greeks for a little bit. And this is really important for us to know about, because This was a really successful Jewish rebellion and revolt in this intertestamental time period that kind of sets the stage for what's come next. Because the Greeks come back,
Yep.
and they come back with a vengeance.
Yeah, that's not good.
They wipe out the Maccabean revolt, and there becomes this policy of any revolt in Judah we take really, really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Any political unrest in Judah, we have to crush immediately. And that is a policy that is maintained by the next empire that comes in,
Rome.
the Romans,
And that really matters
for a lot of reasons.
for the Pharisees.
Yes.
Big deal with them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to, we'll hit kind of what's going on in Judaism at this time in 1 second. But what we kind of need to know here is because of the Maccabees, one, the Jewish people know we kind of can do a little bit of political unrest stuff, and it might actually work. And two, the people who are ruling over them know we take any kind of rebellion, revolt, civil unrest really, really seriously in the nation of Judah, which is going to really matter when Pilate is a Roman governor who's in charge.
Yep.
He gets a little scared about potential rebellions.
Yes.
So that's kind of the political landscape. Eventually, Persia is conquered by Greece. Greece comes in. They try and take over. The Jews actually drive them out because of the hammer. And then Greece comes in, crushes the rebellion.
Might be the coolest nickname you could have.
It's pretty sick.
It's
Especially
pretty
because he gets the nickname of the hammer because he killed a bunch of people
With
a
a
hammer.
With a hammer.
And so Greece comes back in, crushes the rebellion. Rome comes in and crushes Greece.
Yeah.
And that's going to set the stage for what we pick up in the New Testament.
Random thought.
Random thought.
There's a lot of instances in the Old Testament about serious military success with
obscure,
tools.
Yeah.
An ox goad,
The jawbone of a donkey.
the jawbone of a donkey, a hammer,
A tent peg.
a tent peg.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Interesting. There we go.
There you go. So that's kind of the political landscape. The other thing that would probably be helpful that you were getting at for us to talk about is how the Jewish people respond in 400 years of silence with all this political upheaval. How are they thinking? Because they have these promises that God is going to rescue, redeem, and restore his people. They had this promise that there's going to be this king who's going to come to make all things right. So in the meantime, how are they dealing with this?
Go for it. I'm gonna be honest. I'm thinking through, like, we can cut this out. I'm thinking through, like, John the Baptist. They're expecting military success.
Okay,
A
great.
military commander coming in.
We'll
so
roll.
yeah, roll with it.
All right, so
You know more about this than I do.
shout out to NT Wright.
There we go.
So in this intertestamental period, this is what gets called Second Temple Judaism because this is when the temple has been rebuilt
By Zerubbabel.
by Zerubbabel, as recorded in the book of Ezra.
Yep.
So in the midst of all of this overthrow and upheaval, the Jewish people, there's kind of four main ways that we see that the people begin to respond and identify.
Yep.
The first way is the Zealots. Now, we don't know a ton about the Zealots, but
They're mean.
they're mean. They're kind of like a terrorist guerrilla warfare group.
Yep.
So, as best as we can tell, this is one of the groups that gets the least airtime in the Bible.
They had a pretty famous practice, didn't they?
The knives?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might be a little foggy. You can correct me if I'm wrong. They would walk around with kind of like hidden blades and
yeah.
daggers and stuff, and they would just kill major Roman people
Yep.
and run off.
Yep. They would get into crowded marketplaces,
Yep.
draw the knife, slit the throat of a Roman soldier, dip.
Which is crazy.
Which is crazy. And specifically, they're doing this because the Zealots are this like paramilitary group who their view is the way the day of the Lord is going to come is if we bring it about by force. And so they're kind of this group that's like, we will cause God to act by kind of taking the first step ourselves. We're going to kill the Roman officials because the king who is coming, they put all the emphasis on this conquering king who's going to come and rescue the people.
Yep.
That's the Zealots. Not a huge group, but
A dangerous
a
one.
dangerous one.
Yeah.
And we actually know about a zealot in the story of the New
Who's a
Testament.
disciple?
Simon.
Simon.
One of Jesus's folks is a zealot
Not to be confused with the other Simon. Called Peter.
called Peter.
Yep.
So that's the zealots. The other group that we don't know a ton about from the Bible, but we know about from Jewish sources, is a group called the Essenes.
Kind of the opposite demeanor of
The absolute opposite.
the absolute opposite of the Zealots.
So whereas the Zealots were this military group who thought we can bring about the day of the Lord by force, the Essenes said we will bring about the day of the Lord by escaping from the dangers of and the unholiness of the city. We will go out into the desert, and we will seek to be as faithful as we possibly can. They were kind of a little mystical in their outlook, it seems.
Yeah.
They did a lot of copying. Some of the reason we have manuscripts of the Old Testament seems to be the Essene communities did a lot of copying of the text.
Big discovery in the 1940s.
Yes, there's
Potentially from the Essenes.
a place called Qumran that may or may not have been a community of Essenes.
Not 100% sure, but there's a kid throwing rocks in a cave, hit some pots. We found
the Bible,
the biggest, most complete copy of Isaiah that has ever been found.
Yeah.
Potentially hidden there by the Essenes.
Which we don't know a ton about the Essenes, but like we were saying, they kind of take the opposite tact of the Zealots, and they're like, we will get away, we will hide out, we will seek to live lives of holiness and stuff in the desert, and we won't have any connection with the rest of the people.
Yep.
And if we do that well, then the day of the Lord will come.
Yep.
Then we have two other groups, and these are the ones that get all the airtime.
Everybody knows about these
in
guys.
the Bible.
Yeah.
So one group is called the Sadducees. Now, this is the group that gets a little bit less airtime, but this is a group of people who are in Jerusalem in particular, and they make up one half of the Jewish ruling council called the Sanhedrin that's made up of the Sadducees and their counterparts, the Pharisees, who we all recognize that name because they get a lot of airtime.
Now, do the Pharisees and the Sadducees get along with each other?
They do not. They actually are pretty opposed to each other.
Sadducees, correct me if I'm wrong here, are a little bit more liberal when it comes to the law and stuff. Pharisees are hyper conservative.
So one of the things that we see about the Sadducees in the New Testament is one of their defining beliefs is that they do not believe in the resurrection of the dead.
Yeah.
So for the Sadducees, this life, all we've got.
Yep.
And so for them, the day of the Lord is really not like a future thing. They basically are like, this is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
So we should buddy up to Rome. We should kind of cozy up to the political power. We don't want to compromise too much on what we're supposed to be doing as God's people, but we want to do what we can to make things as smooth as possible.
Yeah.
The Sadducees were kind of the political elite. They had control over the temple of Jerusalem. And we don't have a ton of teaching from the Sadducees in the Bible because they're not kind of the primary group that Jesus is interacting with.
Yeah.
But that's one group of Jewish thought is, whereas the Zealots are like, we're going to kill the Romans, and the Essenes are like, we're going to get as far away from Rome as possible. The Sadducees are like,
whatever.
what if we make friends with them? That would probably make us richer. And that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
And then we have one last group.
Probably the most popular that everybody knows in the New Testament.
Certainly the most commonly known.
Yeah, the Pharisees.
And the Pharisees, we always think of as the bad guys because they're usually the ones who are trying to
Argue with
get Jesus.
and stuff, yeah.
But really, what we have to understand about the Pharisees, if we want to understand what they're getting at, is the main reason that Jesus and the Pharisees are colliding is, one, whereas the Sadducees are located in Jerusalem, the Pharisees are located throughout the Judean countryside. That's where most of Jesus' ministry takes place, and so that's part of the reason that he sees them a lot. The Sadducees ran the temple, the Pharisees ran synagogues, so like little local places of worship for the Jewish people.
Yeah.
The other reason is theologically, of all four groups, the Pharisees are actually the closest aligned to what Jesus believed.
Real big fans of the law.
Real big fans of the law.
So they love the law so much they sort of build a law around the law.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
So the Pharisees, their thought of the day of the Lord is the reason that we were exiled in the first place is because we did not keep the law.
Yeah.
Fact check. True.
Very true.
True. Israel failed to keep the law. They failed to be obedient, and ultimately they faced exile. And so the Pharisees, seeing that, knowing that, they said, the way that the day of the Lord will come is if we as God's people actually faithfully live as God's people by keeping the law. And so what'd they do?
They build a law around the law.
Yeah, they fenced in the law.
Yeah.
The law says...
Which in and of itself was a fence. So they built a fence around the fence.
There's a bunch of fences.
A lot of fences.
A lot of fences.
Yeah.
Good fences make good neighbors.
Yeah. You ever see a neighbor with two fences?
Yes, actually.
Only place I've seen two fences are prisons.
There is a house in my neighborhood with two fences.
Nice.
But it's a little
Is it a
odd.
fence around a fence?
Yeah.
Wow. Is he a Pharisee?
I don't know what's going on, honestly. It's a strange
This is so
situation.
weird.
But the idea the Pharisees had was, so God says you cannot work on the Sabbath. And they said, we need to make sure nobody accidentally works on the Sabbath.
Yep.
So here's like 8, 9, 10, 12 different rules about what you can or cannot do on the Sabbath that aren't actually in the law, but are attempts to make sure that God's people don't accidentally transgress.
Yeah.
Honestly, the Pharisees' hearts start out
Pretty good.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Their desire is to be holy and to be righteous and to live as God's people.
Yeah.
But
Somewhere along the lines, we know they get prideful.
Mhm.
They care a lot about what people see,
Mhm.
and also they lose sight of the big picture
Mhm.
and really hyper focus in on the law as the means, as the end all be all of salvation and
yeah.
the kingdom of God.
Yeah, so there's this picture again in the prophets that God is going to write his law on his people's hearts. He's going to make this new covenant with them, and it's going to be a work of God that he is going to accomplish. He will wash them clean. He will give them new hearts. He will fill them with his spirit. He will write his law on their hearts. The Pharisees seem to try and take that matter into their own hands.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They fail to see that the law was made to be fulfilled in a sense.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see that whole viewpoint really come to a head when Jesus shows up and starts saying things like, I've come to fulfill the law. The Pharisees, not going to like that.
No, not at all.
Not going to like
They
that.
try to kill him a lot.
They succeed,
Yeah.
but not for long.
Pause. We know the Pharisees and the Sadducees don't like each other.
They don't.
They don't like Jesus, either one of them. They don't like Jesus so much that they kind of team up a little bit
They'll kind of
for
team
the
up a little bit.
purpose of killing Jesus.
Yeah.
And
So-
they succeed.
Like we said, none of that part of the story is actually in the Bible. We're kind of pulling from ancient sources, seeing some different Jewish writings about what's going on at the time.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the cultural milieu that we're going to see Jesus show up in, is a people who are under oppression, who are looking for God's restoration, for God to keep the promises that he's made, and they're all going about it in these different ways, whether it's by force or by escaping or by buddying up with the power or by trying to make sure they are so holy and so righteous that God has to come and save them. Jesus is going to show up and offer a new way, and none of the groups are going to get what they expect.
Yep.
But that is a story of the Old Testament.
That is the story of the Old Testament.
And with that, I think we're ready for the new.
We'll see you in the New Testament,
Here we
folks.
go. Time
did
for the
it.
Gospels.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this week or weeks, again, depending on how we cut
Whatever it
this
is.
together, of HSM Reads the Bible,
Yeah, here we are.
the podcast.